Take a breather, recharge, and join us on the Rivalry Cooldown, where we give you an unfiltered view on the current topics in esports from the experts. On today's episode, we will be discussing power dynamics in esports and gaming and how it leads to certain unfortunate situations. So with us, we have Richard Lewis and Slasher, some of the best investigative journalists and consultants in the esports industry, as well as Nahaz, our stats economist. And we will also be joined by Sajedene, someone who has extensive experience in event organization, talent management, and pretty much every single other role you can think of in esports and gaming. Let's dive in.
So, as I said, our topic for this week is power dynamics, and there's been a couple of very big news items. So, if we go back a few months, we've talked about on previous episodes, Riot, right? Everything at Riot, get into that. There's been a popular cosplay photographer that's had a lot of allegations come out against him. And most importantly, a fairly high-profile, high-res employee, Elvine, has been arrested and then I believe is now out on bail for pursuing sex with underage women, or, well, minors, actually, I believe is just what happened with that. So Rod broke the story. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about how it came across your desk or sort of what you saw happen as it unfolded.
Hi, hey, how's it going, everyone? 11 Alive did break the story, which is the local Atlanta journalist. I was just one of the first people to find it because that's what happens when you follow 10,000 people on Twitter. And I noticed that that person, one of the people that was surrounded up, was part of the community. So I, spread that information, and then I tracked the story as best as I could from here in New York, getting the arrest record is publicly available online if you want to go to the Brookhaven PD website, and I did as best as I could to update people on what was going on with him from the initial report.
And so what was interesting was I saw this tweet, was alarmed because I know the guy, and was very closely following the story. And what was interesting were the replies that you got. So I don't know if anybody else was really following, Slasher's initial tweet chain, but did you see what happened, what people were saying about him when they realized he had been arrested?
Well, yeah, to have really that many women, especially replying on the post, all having some interaction with him, and a lot of them saying that it was a negative interaction, whether it was a creepy feeling or it was a weird meeting or they spoke online sometime, or now, as me and Richard have both found out, many women have had strange interactions with him, or worse, privately, not just the ones that were replying on the tweet chain thread. So it was pretty evident pretty quickly that this was going to be a larger issue than just him individually as a streamer getting arrested for this, which is a big deal to begin with. He was a Twitch partner, he was working for a company within the space, and he was a community manager, so he did kind of have a front-facing job, and that alone is awful. And then you add on top of it everyone coming out with their experiences.
And I think there's a tendency too, when something like this happens, I always hear at least one idiot come back with the whole, well, this is attention-seeking behavior, where some of these people that are coming forward are trying to pile on or trying to put themselves in the spotlight. And I can just tell you again, the data say that is extraordinarily rare. Okay, that when something like this drops, and this occurs in a lot of different industries, and I've seen this fall out in different places than esports. Most of the stuff that comes out in the aftermath isn't just noise.
Well, and it's funny, I'd forgotten about the attention-seeking thing, and as someone who knew him and had to deal with him in that context, let me tell you, I don't want to be known as that. I don't want people to see me and say, she had to deal with that creeper at that event that one time. None of these women want that.
That's the thing that I think a lot of people don't really pay attention to, is that even if you forget the data for a minute that says that that's actually quite rare, if you think about the incentives, even that argument is screwed up from an individual perspective. But I digress, please.
No, incentives economics, it's your thing. We gotta expect it. I can share personally what happened with me. Is pretty It's pretty low level, but it's going to be a good launching point for what I really want us to kind of get into today. It's going to expand past women. It's going to be about the industry in general. So I initially met him through working with DreamHack. DreamHack has events in Atlanta, which is where he's based. And I interviewed him at one about a year and a half ago. And there was actually another streamer there that I knew that I was going to talk to. And he warned me. He was like, oh, no, you don't want to talk to him. He gets really aggressive with women and he's really creepy. And that was my first interaction with the guy. So a year later, I'm working DreamHack Atlanta again. So I'm in town and he sees my profile on a dating app. So a profile that has my actual information on it that I do not like to share. And he looks me up on Instagram because he knows me from my online profile and starts messaging me there and asking me out and trying to meet up with me and all of these things. And the only thing that got him to leave me alone was that I said I was seeing someone else because that was the only excuse that was acceptable, that was respected. And I couldn't just tell him off because he knows my information, because he saw me on the dating app, and because he works in the space. I work for DreamHack. I have to work at the High Res Expo and interview people and do this content, and I can't be rude to this guy because he has a lot more power than me. And ultimately, that's what ends up happening is you see power dynamics, and that's what I saw in all of the replies to Slasher on Twitter was all of these women that said, he made me so uncomfortable, but who could I tell? What could I say? He's a respected community member. So I don't know if Richard saw any of that. I know you talked to some people as well. I don't know if you heard any of that.
So again, you know, like this is a tough thing for me to say, but you know, I obviously want to try and be as fair and balanced and impartial as possible. So the first thing is obviously reminders, which is going to seem funny in light of what I'm about to say, but obviously innocent until proven guilty, blah blah blah. Due process, you know, that he could very well go to court on the 14th and be completely acquitted. Mm-hmm. You know, that's always a chance, right? So, you know, I'm not saying it's likely, but it bears thinking about. I also think it's probably worth making the distinction between a creep and somebody that probably does use their status to try and influence people into trysts and dates and fumbles or whatever the fuck angle he was going for, and an actual sexual predator. Now, in terms of the women who've come forward to me, yeah, there's lots of women who were coming forward and said he made me very uncomfortable. He was very forthright in the notion that we should go on a date. This kind of reminds me of when like Aziz Ansari got me too'd a little bit. You know, being a tone deaf asshole isn't necessarily worth the same vitriolic condemnation that is, you know,
that is abusing your power.
Yeah. So it's a line that I always try not to stray across because it's very easy to dunk on the losers and the people that do pursue women this vehemently. But there's been at least 4 women who've come forward to me that have given me stories, and I'm aiming to write this up in a report on VP Esports. But they've told me about behaviors that easily crosses that line into things that I would deem to be potentially illegal, to certainly be predatory in nature, and dangerous and worrying. So I think the broader point here that always blows my mind when stories like this come out, it's been an open secret that this guy is this way. Yeah. Lots of people, his co-workers, his colleagues, people like yourself, Reinessa, have said, yeah, he's been like this for years. He's always been like this. I mean, the fact that when he was released on bail, he was cited in the gym where the employees have free access to. He just went there as if nothing had happened, and has been shown in other reports he was Twitter DMing people and messaging them and saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, everything's fine. I just got to get a lawyer. It's all going to blow over." I mean, at this point, I'm wondering about his sanity levels, honestly, because you know what I mean. The whole thing seems so absurd, but. Yeah, there's definitely a bigger conversation to be had about his abuse of power and influence for sure.
Which I'm sure we'll see come out as you do that report and as more news stories come out. So I want to know, Saj has experience with, so she works as a talent manager. She's managed players. You had, I know you were very heavily involved in organizing your guys' Dota LAN last year. And maybe I'm biased, in Dota, there are some well-kept secrets. There are some open secrets. But when you are hiring talent or when you are looking to work with someone, how open are these open secrets? How easy is it to find out if someone is like this or not?
I mean, at least like specifically to this industry, there's definitely a lot of like skeletons in the closet. That it's one of those things, it's a combination of people are fully aware that they're happening, but since, the internet, like the community are not, you can't say, I'm going to have this tournament and not invite this person because of that, that information that you have to have them there. So, and no one wants, like, as you guys like brought up, no one wants to be that person to bring it up. No one wants to, and that goes with talent and people that, team owners, managers. There's just like, everybody has something, but nobody wants to be that person to say, hey, they did this or they've done this and they're not actually a good person to be working with and they shouldn't be here.
Yeah, because what happens? Like if you were to say that, say Nahaz was a horrible person, right? And everybody in the industry knew, but the community demanded, you absolutely needed him at this event. I mean, what would happen if you were to, as the event organizer, were to say, no, we know this about him, we're not inviting him?
I mean, there would be, we would get tweets, we would get Reddit threads up, or like, why isn't so-and-so here? I mean, I've personally even experienced that even among my peers, where even if you do try to open up, kind of circling back to even if you open up and be that person and say, hey, this person has done this, people are like, they're sympathetic, but that's it. And then suddenly, like, it is sympathetic to you right now, and then they go around and say like, dude, what's up, how's it going? Because you can't break that, it's a networking thing. You can't break that relationship with that person.
And it's this weird bond between the upper echelons in a way.
Exactly. So it's either someone speaks up and they're the ones that are ostracized, or you need everybody else to actually like say, you know what, as a collective, this isn't okay. But that's not going to happen. It's too much still of like a clique in a circle that it's really, really hard to break. And unless something massive, such as like, being arrested by the FBI happens, it's just not going to be a thing. And I think like a lot of, people in the industry who are victim to that see it like constantly, that it's just so disheartening. Like I've had like other women approach me and say like, hey, I know what happened to you, or did you hear what happened to so-and-so? Maybe if you say something, other people will come out and say like, but I don't want to be that person. Someone else doesn't want to be that person. So everybody just stays quiet, because there's no winning in like being that person to speak up.
Again, it's an incentive problem, right? It's not as if whistleblowers get rewarded most of the time. And that's true across
everything,
all areas of business and media.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what it took Cecilia, the reporter that broke the Riot story, to get all of those stories. I mean, to penetrate Riot, that must have taken an immense amount of work. And granted, now Riot is that's going to be a never-ending flow of issues with them, I think. But I can't imagine. All those women had left the company at that point, though. And that's the thing, is that if you leave the industry, yeah, you can speak up, because then it doesn't matter if the community is going to roast you over the coals or something. It's interesting.
I mean, I would say almost half or more, or maybe most of the conversations that I had with women that came to me, and I want to hear what Richard has to say about this, like a big thing about it within our talking was they have to stay anonymous. No one can know who they are. They don't want to get this story to get out at all. They're having trouble even telling me what was going on. I remember even one distinctly saying this would be kind of closure for her to be able to finally like talk about this. So if you just, you know, look at this one person and how much impact he has had, because yeah, as Richard also mentions, there was like a stark difference. He was allegedly trying to meet up with a 14-year-old girl and not use a condom and had sex with her. He literally Chris Hansen himself in the esports scene, and that is crazy. It's not like he just got arrested for picking up a prostitute or something that would be related in that way. He did something that was really messed up. There must be dozens of other stories about this with other people that women have.
Yeah, and look, the key component to his pathology, you know, for want of a better word, was that he was looking at people who were in sort of vulnerable positions within the industry, be it vulnerability based around their age. So he's a slightly older guy who you know, looks like he's got connections and can make things happen. You know, in one way or another, from something as innocuous as getting you to an event to something a little bit more lavish. You know, he's from a wealthy family. That'll likely come out after the 14th. But also as well, just people who are like on that first rung of the ladder and wouldn't even know any better. You know, there's nobody they could even talk to be forewarned because they're starting their esports journey, and unfortunately for them, the first person they bump into was a piece of shit like this dude. So,
I mean, and how often do we think that happens? I mean, your first event that you go to, the first time you start casting and somebody notices. I mean, and it's more than just women. I mean, this can be a brand new caster with a lot of talent at his studio. It's like, hey, come cast for us for free. We're a big studio. You're okay. You'll learn.
Well, what is true to my experience, and just to keep it on the idea about you know, these kind of predators that we have in the industry. You know, as somebody that has always taken the stance that we have to be absolutely 100% certain before we accuse anybody. There has to be credible evidence. You can't risk, you know, ruining someone's life over false allegations. You can't risk somebody going to prison over false allegations. You know, I'm unequivocally a believer in that. But what I'll also say is it's definitely shocked me in esports how many stories like this have come up. And it kind of like, it shakes my faith to the core a little bit, because I've always believed the esports industry looks after its own. Increasingly what I've been finding out, and I'm not talking about, you know, there's a story I had to deal with on the side. I couldn't publish it. There wasn't enough to publish it. It would have been journalistically irresponsible if I'd ran with the story. But there was a player, and I won't say what game, no identifying stuff whatsoever, but who was basically bullying women into sort of giving them nudes, and doing this habitually. And then they were never off the hook. What would happen was, once he got one, he would then say, right, well, I'm going to release the nude publicly if you don't send me more whenever I want. And was doing this to a network of women. And I've confronted the individual about it and said, listen, I could never put this in print because you're very fortunate. None of the women want any attention drawn to this. But if you do not fucking stop, I'll find another way to make your life very miserable indeed.
I had someone try that with me. I mean, I didn't end up having an issue with it because, you know, I knew what they were going for. But I had someone promise a lot of connections, invite people to parties that were important people when I was starting out streaming and casting and things to make it look like they were connected. And I know that they got inappropriate pictures of other streamers and then would add their family on Facebook and send those pictures to them.
I've been at events with women where they're sat next to me and in real time, I'm watching them get unsolicited dick pics. I don't understand any of this. Like they're turning around and saying, look, if I've got to look at this, you can fucking look at it too. and they're showing me cock and balls. And I'm like, guys, like what? What is going
what's the
on?
thought
Yeah, what the
process?
fuck is this? I
Well,
don't understand it.
Let me make you feel a little better, Richard, because it's not unique to esports. I mean, we've had this, we've had sort of this blow up in economics very recently. There's a site called basically Econ Job Market Rumors, which began as an online forum. It was actually, I mean, as silly as it sounds, because this is at its core some random online bulletin board, it was used by the top departments to talk about hiring behind the scenes. And you would go on there. I mean, I remember logging on for the first time a few years ago, and I mean, you would see comments about people that sexual comments that were obviously not appropriate. And
Not about hiring.
you knew
someone.
what was fucked up about it is that you knew that some of the job candidates were reading this stuff, and you're going, I mean, it's not on the same level as dick pics, but I think in a relative sense to that industry, it kind of is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is happening everywhere. And part of the good that I hope that comes of the Me Too movement is finally the dismantling of this wingman culture that we have among men, where you always have your boys back, where you're always helping your guy to try to get in there. No, fucking stop it. All right. That just, I'm sorry. I understand. I went to college in the 90s, guys. I get it, but this shit needs to stop.
Well, and the hard thing is that I never want anyone to feel attacked, right? There's a lot of people who aren't doing this. Actually, that's the thing. Like Richard says, the esports industry looks after its own and protects its own. You know, for the most part, they do. Honestly, I truly believe that. For the most part, they do. But the problem is, there's a lot of us now. That most part, there's still hundreds that are a problem.
You have to be careful too, I think, even how you talk about that, because that terminology is itself a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
Who exactly are we looking after?
Yeah.
Because real often you're looking after one person at the expense of another.
Mhm.
And it's fine to say we've all got each other's backs, but there does need to be a line.
Yeah, of common decency.
Right.
But the thing is that I never want someone to feel attacked when you say, oh, the esports industry is awful, or oh, this happens all the time. A lot of people say, well, it's not me.
Well,
It's a little hard. I think we celebrate, it's like we celebrate being assholes. Like, it's in our industry, being edgy and being like on that, on the cusp and like saying like that snarky kind of like, yes, that's great, like haha, that's amazing, like we're a freaking edgelord
got him.
and stuff. And yeah, got him. Like you have we love that because we're not like the normal sports where everything is like tie up and suit up and super PC. We like that we can say these things. So when someone is saying, oh, this person did something, like, oh, that guy, he was just fucking around, like,
Kappa.
don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's like that's not really him. He's actually a really nice guy. And when someone like speaks up and then that's the response that they get, they're just like, well, shit, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong and I shouldn't be feeling like
Again,
this.
though, you got to be careful with that too, right? Because at least in my experience, because I saw a lot more of this than I wanted to in academia before coming into esports. It's a matter of predators will find a way to hide in the grass. They'll find a way to hide in the trees. It's different environments, but the people do bad shit and they figure out how to hide in a particular environment. And the common denominator is there does need to be some level of responsibility with regards to people around this kind of behavior to say, look, man, that's not cool. And, hats off to Richard for finding a way to say, look, I can't responsibly go forward with this, but I know on a personal level that what you're doing is wrong. And I am going to find a way. I'm going to do what I can to fight that behavior.
Well, but I mean, think about it again. It's another power dynamic, right? Richard has a hell of a lot of power. People listen to him. People tune in. What he says means a lot. These women, if they were to come forward and say something and confront a professional player, a well enough and they're there to try and say something, everyone is going to say, you're doing this for attention, or, you got yourself into this mess, is another fun one to see as a response.
Yeah, what was she wearing?
There's going to
Get the
be,
fuck out of here.
yeah, there's going to be a lot of fallback on a woman who comes forward about this, because people love pros. They respect them. They revere them. And a lot of them have earned that. They're amazing at what they do. We understand that's how fandoms work. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with loving professional players, but there's a power issue there. But when Richard goes to one of them and says,
Oh, I still get it
fucker.
too, if it makes anyone feel any better. I'd probably got about a good half a dozen fan bases that would like to see me burnt alive. So
of course,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also part of your brand, right? That what you say, you mean.
yeah,
Because you don't care
gonna
if people
say,
hate
well, I
you.
got very uncomfortable with all this talk about edgelords and how we celebrate assholes. I'm like, thank God for that, or I wouldn't have a fucking career.
I just want to make sure we have a separation of a few things here. Also being pretty much kind of an asshole myself as well, and anyone who knows me can attest to that. So I have some good perspective on that end. But okay, so we take let's just say, is someone just being a creep and talking to women and just kind of being an asshole is different than like R. Kelly trapping like a dozen women in his house and then like having like a sex dungeon.
Which is also different than saying this player fucked up on this map call, they're a terrible captain. Well, a different kind of asshole.
Well, I would say that R. Kelly and his sex slave mansion is kind of equal to Elvine trying to solicit a 14-year-old girl and have sex with her without a condom in like Chris Hansen style. It is like the extreme, most fucked up thing that you can do, and it has to be looked at like with condom. You should be condemning R. Kelly that more than like. I mean, Chris Brown is a piece of shit too. They're probably pretty close together, but I mean, maybe even R. Kelly beats Chris Brown in terms of actual insanity of being an awful person. So Elvine and what he did is pretty bad. Being an edgelord in itself, and I've come out against like edgelord behavior personally, but like in itself, it's like debatable based on current politics or current social norms, whatever you want to believe culture is, and edgelord can be defined in like it's a ton of different ways, and it shouldn't automatically be the same as being like an actual horrible predator doing illegal things that you go to jail for.
Yeah, the difference is just the culture, right? If the culture is to be an asshole and then say, it's cool, they didn't mean it, they're just like trying to be funny. The problem is that, that makes sense, right? That makes sense superficially for the sake of a broadcast, for the sake of entertainment. The problem comes when there are deeper issues, when that person is more than just an asshole on Twitter, and you try and say something like, they trapped me in a hallway and I was terrified for my goddamn life. They're like, they were just screwing around with you. That's what they're like. No. But unfortunately, those gradations start to get very, very murky. And the problem is that being an edgelord, being an asshole, it gives you a fan base. It makes you popular. It makes people like you or hate you. They tune in either way, so that works for you. But the problem is that gives you this like weird free pass excuse thing that makes it hard for anybody to speak up.
Again, though, you do have to be careful, because I've now been a part of in academia. I've had at least one firm that I've worked with in the finance sector, and now in esports, I've been a part of these conversations in a couple different contexts now. And what I've found is that when something like this happens, it's only natural. We want to be able to blame something. Mm-hmm. And ideally, we want to be able to blame something that's not us. And so we try hard to pinpoint aspects of the culture and environment that we're involved in and pin it on that. And this is not to say that there's no merit to that. We should take a look at why these things happen and if there's anything that is enabling this kind of behavior to go undetected. But again, my experience is that there are, regardless of what you're doing, there are people that engage in this kind of predatory behavior, and they will find ways to hide. And the best way to at least get a start stamping this kind of shit out is, if you are fortunate enough to find yourself in a position of power, you do something about it. When you act on it, when you get told, this kind of a story, or you pass it on. At least do something. Because once that line gets crossed from tomfuckery, whatever you want to call it, to honest to God predation, it's a very good bet that that line at least is going to be crossed again, if not has been already.
And I think there's something to be said as well. One thing that is observable in this industry, especially, I think, where it's very easy to attain a lot of status in a very short space of time and a lot of influence comparatively to other industries that require, I don't know, competencies. You know, you see people, they start out as assholes, but when it's unchecked, they can become monsters. And I've certainly seen that once or twice in esports, you know, on the ground floor level. So
well, that's an interesting transition. If we want to talk culture or starting out as assholes and not really getting penalized, we can move into our favorite developer discussions. Let me
ask Nikki one more time, because she's kind of in a very in a unique position here, having served a lot of different roles in esports. I mean, you've probably worn more different hats successfully than anybody else I know in the business. And the question is, like, is there anything else that you can point to about the industry and the way it's developed? Is there anything you can point to where things are now versus where things were 4 or 5 years ago? You know, has there been progress made? Are we just as bad or worse? Like, what's your read on things right now?
So I think overall we're definitely getting better. It's been a while since I've had to deal with, say, like a publisher or organizer requiring a woman host to wear a skirt on stage because it's just prettier to look at, you know?
Okay, that's something.
Didn't know that happened, but okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A very big company. And you're like, why? You know, like, I could just be as powerful or as strong. I'm not mean, but like the talent that I was like working with, like wearing like slacks if I choose to. I would like, if I want to wear a skirt, let me wear the skirt, right? I think at the same time, because of how prevalent like social media and how important it is in our industry, that you just see all of these things, and you it's so much easier to like latch onto and fiend, I suppose, like the negativity than it is the positive. So I'm not saying, you know, we're like in this like utopia that like things are great. Like, there's always going to be constant issues, but I think it's also nice that we have that, you know, we have the resources and the platform to actually like call it out and address it when it does happen. I just don't know how overall it's going to change, because, and I know like the whole Me Too and the women movement are trying, but I also definitely think that at least like from on the, you know, on the male side of the fence, there definitely needs to be a lot more progress, just because if I say something, no one's going to listen to me because it's a perspective. It's like that perception, like coming back to the whole, you know, the whole celebrating the whole edgelord asshole thing. Dude, I would love to be a fucking edgelord asshole like you guys. But when I do it, I'm just a bitch, or my favorite thing, I'm a fucking cunt because I'm a girl and it just doesn't come off that way. But when, you know, like someone who's impressionable is seeing the people and the players and the talent that he's looking up to like calling that out, then obviously it's going to be, and we're still getting there, because like I've seen like in Dota at least, like people like Blitz like calling that stuff out, and they get into weird like crazy debates, and they're already someone that I feel like should be like a respected person here, but people are going to fight it because why are we changing the status quo? I've grown up in Counter-Strike 1.5 and we've told the, you know, we've been assholes to everybody. We're equal opportunity assholes. But I'm like, it's one thing to be like an asshole edgelord as your personality. It's another thing to tell someone to go kill yourself online all the time just because that's the norm.
And the flip side of the culture that you're talking about, the edgelord culture, is you just have a lot of these people on social media, Reddit, Twitter, wherever the hell, that are just stirring the pot. That aren't really even that invested in the position that they're taking. They're just farming karma, who the hell knows what they're doing. And it's well, I still have problems engaging with some of these things on social media.
I had someone message me because I'm following Elvine on Instagram, because that's where I got asked out many times by him. And the reason I didn't unfollow him or leave it or anything is I didn't want anything to happen to those messages. There was nothing inherently wrong with what he said. It was just a little weird. Like I said, I didn't really have any big issues, but I think that's because he met me through high res in a way and like met me professionally. And so that changed his behavior a little bit. But I didn't want to unfollow him. And so this person messaged me and said, hey, you're following this guy. You're going to want to unfollow him. If you don't, I'm going to start tagging you on pedophile posts.
What the fuck?
Yep.
Reasonable behavior.
Yeah. And so he's trying to inform people about a harasser by harassing them and threatening them. So which I responded, trying to speak up and say something and call this out. I was like, I'm going to call this out. And I said, thank you for your information. I'm well aware of the story. I'm actually going to continue following him to assist in the continuing reporting of the situation. This is very accurate. I said, and I appreciate your concern, but please do not harass people, because they have had to deal with something unfortunate and, very logical. And the guy said, cool, thanks for being a pedophile supporter. And screenshotted the conversation and said she would rather help the media report on a pedophile than protect innocent kids, which made zero sense. And like this whole thing, and then started tagging me on Twitch posts, being like, she's partnered on Twitch. How dare you work with her? And, just everywhere. This guy did it for days. And I'm like, are you just looking for free content? I don't understand.
Well,
this doesn't affect me, but I don't get what's happening.
There's a bigger conversation about what's going on there, and I don't want to derail the whole episode, but I've been banging on about it for 2 years, and that is that social media, we're not meant to have social media. Our brains aren't evolved enough to be permanently plugged in the way we are, and it's driving everybody mentally ill. Like, I'm not.
Well, they're never going to. They've evolved. Social media got big as fast as it did because it pokes the most primitive impulses in the id, and it's instant gratification, man. I mean, our brains have evolved the way they have because when you heard roaring in the fucking jungle next to you, you needed to run, right? It was survival, but social media has brought back some of that instant gratification motive, and it takes advantage of it. I mean,
it is the evolution of the internet. I mean, there is always going to be people on throughout the entire history of the internet whose only objective or goal is for the lulz. Like, in general, it is to laugh about stuff, and then the overall larger terms of like griefing or trolling come from the gaming community. Those are gaming centric things because you did it within the video game, which you played online, and usually it had relation in some aspect to actually a competitive game of like going AFK and not being able to play, or even way back in the day this happened. That's kind of how it evolved in IRC, yada yada. And here we are today, where now social media is huge, the internet is bigger, and you have those still the same principles because there's new 14-year-olds that love to make people fucking get pissed off on the internet and have a laugh. And on top of that, you do have like extreme polarization of like political beliefs and culture, and the Western world, especially in America, is going through an insane time right now, just about everywhere. And you bring like all that shit together,
not independent,
with the gaming community, and then you've got like a bunch of stuff now that's happened, including people going like, shit talk has been taken to almost the extreme where, telling people to kill themselves and that they should fucking die and their family should be killed and that they're the N-word, or, every racial slur is to a lot of people either normal because whatever, or they actually think it's funny because they're idiots. And unfortunately, that is like at least part of the trolling, griefing aspect of the internet, which is from gaming. And so, of course, within the gaming community, it's going to be like the most apparent.
Well, there's another power dynamics thing there as well that I was thinking about when I wanted to do this show, that there's the one issue in which you're at a convention, you're at an event, and someone is irritating the hell out of you, and you can't deal with it because they're in a power position. But there's also an aspect of social media. If someone with no followers and nothing to lose is harassing you, they have nothing to lose. And you have everything with your reputation. And so even though, you know, you've built a following, you are popular, you are successful, you should be the one in complete power, there's absolutely nothing you can do, because if you respond to them, people say, why do you care? And if you don't respond to them, who knows how many people they can influence? And then you're also not calling out that behavior. Like, I mean, Saj, I've seen some of the comments you get and stuff. If you were to call out every single person who had an inappropriate comment, what would people think about you?
They just think that I'm feeding the trolls, or why do I let that get to me? And it's like, why, you know, and a lot of times it's like, don't worry, it's just like online, like just block them. And like that's the biggest thing that bothers me, is when people tell me to just ignore and block this behavior.
Right.
Because the thing is, I've been doing it since God knows how long. Steam wasn't even around. I was still on GameSpy, and I've been blocking people like that. And it hasn't changed the behavior. So it's not working. And sure, I still do it here and there, because sometimes, you know, I don't have the energy to deal with that stuff. Like, and people think that some of the harassment that I get, it's like, oh, that's nothing. Okay, you get commented on your looks. I've had messages. I've literally had someone from their personal Facebook send me a photo of the guy that broke into my house and say, this guy's gonna break out and kill you and rape you again. And I'm like, that's not okay. And I get messages like that still to this day. And then I'm like, you tell me to ignore that. Sure, I can ignore it, but it doesn't already affect the fact that I saw it. It's affected me, and it still affects me. And it's something like that's very hurtful and personal. And I'm sorry that I'm human and I freaking have feelings, and that hits me like that. But what can I do?
I think the one thing you'll notice about anybody that tells you like to just sort of like wash it off and ignore it, they all have no followings and have no conception of what it's like to literally have hundreds of thousands, sometimes, you know, people all abusing you at once. Like, people don't understand, like the people who say, oh, don't feed the trolls, that is provably not a strategy that works.
You had the signature thing recently. That's the thing you've been attacked for.
Richard is an expert at this. You need to hear his thoughts. Continue on. Got a great Twitter strategy. I am not the hugest fan, but I actually think it's a step in the right direction. I think he's on the right track.
Well, yeah. So my strategy is this. It's just fuck you. But you know, it's when people attack me, what I do is I like to exasperate them to the point where they end up blocking me. You know, I'll point out their stupidity. Occasionally, I'll retweet it to my followers, so my followers can see the stupidity I'm dealing with, and then my followers can ask them like, "Why are you saying this?" You know, because what you've got to realize is that, yeah, on the internet there are a lot of assholes, but if you've built up a following, you do have fans too, and people who will be supportive. But then eventually, what'll happen is I get to a point where it's like it's like turning the tables. They get sick of me. You know, they get sick of me, like replying to them, responding to them, and they end up blocking me and leaving me the fuck alone. And it's like ignoring them doesn't do anything. All you end up with is a Twitter feed where it's just clogged. It's just clogged with shit. And you can't get anything done, and you can't see the tweets that you want to see, and you can't interact with the people you want to interact with. So, as Rod says, my strategy is just head to head. You know, like if you want to say something bad about me, all right, cool, game on. You know, I won't attack somebody, but I'll certainly, you know, judo them if they're going to be a fucking idiot. So that's what I do. It's Twitter judo, basically. So yeah, and so far I'd say it works. Like I've had people message me like please stop. You know, like I shouldn't have said anything. I'll delete my tweets. It's like, okay, yeah, it's not nice, is it? It's not nice when people are abusive on the internet, and it's especially not nice when, you know, maybe somebody with a bigger following points out that you're being an asshole, and people see it, and you get signal boosted as being the piece of shit. So I wouldn't encourage harassment or anything, but if you're going to be an asshole and people notice you being an asshole, expect to be called out that you're being an asshole.
And that's, I think, what a lot of this sort of victim blaming doesn't get is that, you know, this whole ignore them and they'll go away, or ignore them and they'll stop the behavior. you know, that might work on the playground when that guy's got to show up with the same face at the same playground with the same group of people and the same whatever teachers may or may not be watching the following day. Okay? This is the internet, man. That guy is not just showing up once and bothering one person. Okay? He's going around and he's doing a lot of shit. And you know, I made no secret early on when I sort of was coming from academia and didn't know much about the way that esports went online. I had a little beef with Richard. I made it very clear that I didn't
Who would have a beef with Richard?
I made it very clear that I didn't like how he behaved on Twitter. But, you know,
I had him blocked.
there's some shit that there is some shit that you can't ignore. Sometimes you do have to hit back. And sometimes you do have to realize that, you know what, if this idiot is especially, you know, I tend to give a pass to the people with 0 followers. Who I don't give a pass is they got a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand followers. Because if they're coming at me in a way that's truly stupid and ignorant, chances are they're probably going to be coming at somebody else that's less equipped to deal with it. And so I think you know, I feel like in some cases I have a bit of a responsibility to hit back, right? You can't. We do need to stop this whole everything is for the lulz. There needs to be some sanity check occasionally, at least.
I don't mind good trolling. I stand by. If you want to trash talk people, fine. If you want to do something for the lulz, and the trolling is
But
what
you better
trolling.
have the thick skin too.
Yeah, well, what trolling used to be was where you deliberately acted stupid to frustrate the other person. Right. That isn't what trolling is now.
No.
Trolling is just being an asshole. It's not the same thing.
Well, yeah, it's true. There's no class anymore in the trolling.
Exactly.
It making it
an art form, dude.
It really did. Like you should have some wit about it. It shouldn't be so like insulting, but it could still be really annoying.
Borderline satirical.
No.
Yes, exactly.
Trolling is now something that you claim to have been doing when the tide of opinion turns against you. It's like, no.
Yeah, that's it. Trolling is the fucking get out of jail card. Exactly. Right. When you look like an idiot. And yeah, I'm all for that. What I'm not for is like, you know, what are we talking about here? It's like, okay, social media. You following me is optional. If I express an opinion, why is there this weird clamor to be like, your opinion's bad, you feel bad, fuck you, kill yourself, like
delete your lies and apologize.
Yeah. What like, dude, like, just unfollow, mute me, block me, do whatever you have to do so my opinions don't fuck up your day, and just get on with it, right? Like, it's not, you know, a lot of these people, you're not part of any discourse. You know what I mean? You've just seen something you don't like, and social media has given you the illusion that you're entitled to call me a piece of shit because I've expressed an opinion to people who optionally buy in to following me for the express purposes of hearing my opinions. It's like if I'm a busker and there's a group of people around listening to me play a song, one guy's walking on his way to work, hears fucking Wonderwall for the 5,000th fucking time, hates it, freaks out, and starts pelting me with eggs and trying to beat me up and smash my guitar. We'd probably say that guy had some sort of antisocial behavioral problem. Yet that is the kind of drive-by abusive culture of social media. Yeah. That's where we're at right now with it. And the person who does that thinks they're justified. This is what I mean about, you know, mental instability. It's insane to me that people think that's actually, I'm the good guy here.
I'll be open about it, right? I still don't, in a lot of cases, I still don't know what to do about the fact that there is no expertise anymore. That at some point when I have someone that is engaging with me that basically at the end of the day says you're just doing it wrong. You're wrong about economics, or you're wrong about statistics. Okay, that is very possible. I could very well be wrong, but I have now studied these fields for 20 years of my life, and if you're going to call me wrong, you need to prove it. You need to either offer a mathematical proof, or you need to offer some credentials or something to tell me that I ought to be listening to you. And that's really verboten. And that's kind of the thing. You know, bring it back to this is something that Nessa and Sajid both said is women everywhere in business. It's a problem that when a woman is assertive, she's a bitch.
I had my thesis committee tell me that I was too confident. In academia, I had a thesis committee tell me I was not arrogant, confident.
No, that remains the. It is interesting that happened to you, because that remains in 15 years in academia. That remains the most heated discussion that I had with a colleague. That a colleague of mine said something similar to a female PhD student that I was advising, and I had to stop the talk and say I just need to speak to you, because that. No.
And that makes social media hard to navigate for women, for smaller personalities, right? So Richard can retweet everybody he wants and say, this guy's a fucking idiot. He can troll the trolls all day long. He can do whatever he wants. But not everybody can do that. And that's one, he's built his brand on it, and that worked for him. That brand would not work for everyone. And honestly,
very kind of you to say so.
But it wouldn't necessarily work for everyone, which makes it very hard to call that behavior out. And then on top of that, if you're the only one saying anything, you kind of look crazy sometimes. Or, oh, my favorite's oversensitive. I love when you get called oversensitive.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a fine line. I understand that, especially, I do agree generally with Richard's approach, even though I think sometimes it goes a little bit too far. that you do want to like go back on the offensive in the same style that they do. Unfortunately, one, you would only be able to do that, like as me and Richard do, if you are a gamer and you kind of like understand that whole culture and you're able to like knock back with the same type of shit that they do. And I understand, like, as a woman, and minorities and underclass people, once you start fighting back, you're not going to get as much acceptance as, like, when we shit talk doing the same style. And I am aware of that. Like, I do, though, think in general, like, I think Mina Kimes, for example, from ESPN, is a pretty popular writer.
She's as good as anybody
she's on TV now. And she talks about sports all day. And she gets pretty much the same mentions and shit talk back to her as, any of us do. And she is quote tweet dunking and shitting on people like all day long. And I love it. I think that type of content is amazing. If someone tells you something stupid, you have the right to take their stupid shit and then turn it back on them. And you can pummel them, as much as you want to within the range that you want to. Richard likes the into the ground, 6 feet under until you can never get back up. I like just hitting them on the ground kind of repeatedly and then letting them come back and then kind of knocking them back down. Again,
yeah, I'm trying to do that less these days, but it's still
it's about.
Yeah.
So I understand it is harder for women to take that approach. I do think it and also it doesn't. She also has like 200,000 followers. She is like a pretty big figure, and it's much harder to do if you don't have that type of following. I understand both of those points.
Obviously, she is so she's just so good, and that's part of the problem in some of these fields, that it takes somebody coming along that just is that much better relative to the average to really change those norms. I kind of personally believe, when you look at somebody like her, that if she wasn't just so damn good at her job, I think that would be a lot less. The other thing I do want to say, though, before we leave this topic,
but how are we changing the culture if we're not using the best examples as we can for other ways to do the same? So while it might be harder for other people to do what Mina is doing, it's not going to change unless more people try, and then you're supportive of that behavior and you help your women friends who are tweet dunking on people talk, and you help them out and you retweet their stuff and you say, that's amazing. And I think that's like going to be. And I think
we've talked about this problem from the low end, from getting micro harassed by random idiot on social media, but there also needs to be a multi-level solution. There needs to be solutions on the top end as well, resources for people that are sort of have gotten past that median, have gotten sort of breaking into the business. And that's why, there's a women in esports mentorship program. There's organizations, I know this is a little bit different, but organizations like AnyKey, one of the big resources, at least in finance and academia, were some of the male professionals tended to be on the younger side who, they wouldn't necessarily always be the ones calling people out, but that it was an open secret that they were somebody that you could come to as a female PhD student if this shit went down, and they weren't afraid to help you formulate a solution, not go solve the problem for you, right? That's very important too. And again, the problem with it is that when you bring something like that up, all of these solutions and all of these approaches have examples where they've failed. And a lot of people will bring up, yeah, fine, no solution is perfect. But I tend to agree with kind of what Nikki said, that you know, at least in my much shorter sample than she has, I do at least see things moving in what I think is a good direction.
Well, and we saw, I don't think it was Team Liquid, but it was another big org tweet. It was a death threat that a player had received because someone, you know, it was really mad about them losing a game. And I don't remember who the team was,
Right.
but they retweeted it and said, "This is not okay." Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was great because a lot of other organizations kind of took up, it became a thing that was trending for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, it's hard with each individual case. It is hard to know where to draw the line because there are some truly pathological cases out there, right? But again, we can use some of these things about social media that lead to some of these problems can also be used for good as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not to sound too trite or corny about it.
But I mean, that's what happened. That tweet was a big deal. That got a ton of people talking about it and saying, "Oh yeah, this isn't okay." But you needed an industry leader to do it.
And just to put in a flip side, you know, to all of this, because again, I always try and walk the line. I think one of the reasons why sort of online discourse becomes particularly destructive when it's focused in this negativity is that it can make people very defensive to a point where they're the assholes and they don't realize it, right? So, I mean, this might be a stupefying lack of self-awareness on my part. Maybe it does apply to me. I don't know. But, you know, the example that immediately comes to mind is that there was a writer for Guild Wars 2 where a streamer had basically like given some very polite feedback to her on how her writing style and how she crafts narratives. And he said, you know, this is my thoughts on it. And this was a guy who'd been a fan of this particular writer, had even called her out by name and said she does great work. And she just went to town on this guy and said, like, you're fucking mansplaining, you're an asshole, get out of here. You know, like, she was really aggressive. I believe that while it's inexcusable, that's obviously a product of being in this constant fog of fucking bullshit, right? Like,
it is. Absolutely.
But she, after being removed from that position because she'd effectively targeted a high-profile customer and partnered streamer for that particular game, she still is sort of laboring under the delusion that she did nothing wrong. And this is what I mean about it's very easy to get mired in it to a point where you lack the self-awareness to realize that, you know, you're the bad guy now, you know?
Again, at the risk of being a professor, I will share my own much smaller epiphany. When I first started doing this, I actually had one of my former MBA students who was kind of into esports. And he had seen one of the exchanges I'd had over Twitter. And he was like, yeah, you know, you may have gone a little far. And I was like, really? What do you mean? And he said something that I still remember. And he said, look, you know, when you're going at somebody in a seminar, okay, there are cues around the room. There are people's expressions that you're unconsciously looking at as indicators that you might be going a little too far. And for better or for worse, a lot of those indicators are not present on social media. You know, the people, a lot of people for better or worse are as likely to egg you on. And that's kind of, it is important to keep people around you that you trust to sort of message you real quick and say, you're kind of being a douchebag.
Well, being ratioed is a thing. I mean, it is a terminology coming from having a really stupid opinion or take and then getting everyone telling you pretty much immediately how dumb you are for the thing that you just said. So, I mean, you know, it just depends on like what your fan base is. Even if you have a bad tweet to other people, if your fan base is enormous and they all like the thing that you said, then it doesn't matter. I mean, our current president and here in America may or may not show the divide of how the internet like works just on like a social media type of level. I think it is a really good.
But that's where we've gotten into so much problem, right? Is that it feels like there's no absolute standard anymore. It feels like everything is being filtered through the lens of how it looks to a certain target audience. And that's not great. By far the best tweet I've seen this week was this tweet that basically says journalism isn't hard. Your job when confronted with one person that says it's raining, another person that says it's dry, is not to quote them both. It's to look at the fucking window. And yeah, it's just that we've all been there. There is
It's
something
not even journalism.
hard to do sometimes.
I mean, that should be the job of every single person, is if you see one source that says this and one source that says this, open your goddamn eyes. Like, don't trust your screen. And that's what ends up happening is people trust their screen. There was a comedy show I was watching last night that said this guy, his dad told him some actor was gay. And for the next 15 years, he told everybody that actor was gay. He's like, did you know? And then he finally told someone who said, what are you talking about? I know his wife. I know his kid. Like, where did this come from? He's like, oh. And then he asked his dad. His dad's like, oh, I thought he was. Oh, well. And it's just...
Yeah, the process now is do I like the person who is saying this more than the person who is saying that? And if so, then this must be true and false. And honestly, I mean, that applies to everything now. I mean, again, it's a poison that's entered into the water supply of discourse, and nobody's really noticed how severe that is, where it's everything is filtered
100%.
through this almost popularity lens that the bad guy can never be right even when he's right.
And
So
I'll tell you one more thing. And the next person, by the way, who tells me that Talib came up with this, I'm going to smack. But the idea of skin in the game is a thing. That's one of the problems with social media, is that there's a whole lot of people weighing in on things that it's hard to measure credentials, fine. But it's often not hard to measure, is this guy at all invested in a thing? If you're not invested in a thing, I will immediately, if not discount, I'm immediately going to downweight your opinion a little bit. Because it turns out a lot of us, we post a lot of shit on social media. A lot of us say things that we haven't fully thought out. It happens. But there's no denying that somebody that has something to lose on a particular topic, that's the first opinion that I tend to trust.
So an important lesson to be learned from Nahaz is to think about who is talking online and what exactly their incentives are. And with those last words from him, that's it for this episode of the Rivalry Cooldown. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll come back with the same cast and pick up where we left off to discuss our favorite topic, developer disaster.